All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first session of the Information Literacy Summit. This is a hook to hang your research, 25 questions to include in graduate information literacy sessions with Omer Farooq and Monica Maher. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute myself and I switched the slide early. So now I'm going to switch the slide. Thanks everyone for being here. So just to give you a little bit of context for what we're going to be talking about today, I want to chat first a little bit about IL instruction at UNO, our university. So UNO is a metropolitan university. We're based in Omaha, Nebraska, and we've been seeing our graduate student enrollment increase steadily each year, which is really exciting. So at our university, we offer over 90 grad programs at both the master's and doctoral levels. Upper level programs in the social sciences account for approximately 27 graduate and 5 doctoral programs. And these are the students that Omar and I are working with as the liaison librarian to education and social sciences and psychology. So in order to meet the needs of our students, Omar, myself, and our other library colleagues offer instruction sessions that are guided by the ACRL framework and tailored to specific upper level courses learning outcomes. So these requests for one-shot sessions come from the teaching faculty of various graduate courses, and we all work pretty closely with the faculty to integrate information literacy at various stages of the programs. So typically focused one-shot sessions are offered when grad students are still completing some of their coursework. For example, Omar and I, we both teach a lot of research methods courses specific to our subject areas. We also offer one-on-one research consultations in which we further discuss students' research and we're able to delve deeper into these interrogative prompts that we have shared during our instruction sessions or any new prompts that might now be more relevant to students as they get started on their theses or dissertation. Many times, the faculty will request that students will meet with librarians one-on-one before they begin a thesis or a dissertation too. So the use of elaborative interrogation prompts as an instructional strategy. We chose to use elaborative interrogation as an instructional strategy since there's been research that show this as an effective strategy, and also our own experiences, I think, have really demonstrated how this strategy can help students to achieve their learning goals in educational contexts. So in short, this strategy is prompting learners to generate an explanation for a fact or an idea. Engaging with the content this way can really facilitate the integration of new information with learners' existing prior knowledge, which makes this strategy really useful for those grad students who we're seeing more and more of, because they already have a lot of that existing knowledge in these subject areas, right? And similarly, the use of elaborations as personal examples or restatements of key concepts are also super effective. So with that, we wanted to share with you some of our prompts, and we've got 25, as you can tell from our title. So the first one is, what is your fundamental motivation for doing this study? So you want to ask the student to ask themselves, why do I care? What interests the student about this topic? Did this interest emerge during their coursework stage, or was it there even before that? Writing a thesis or a dissertation is a long and laborious process. So how will this motivation sustain them through a really long effort? Second question is, how did this interest develop? Who or what inspires your work? So further discussing the interest in this research area, are there any scholars or researchers whose work has inspired this student? And as they scan through the literature, can they identify any traditional, representative, or emergent studies in this area? Third question, how would you describe your focus? So getting more specific, there are certain key concepts or variables that the student is interested in. This could be a sub-area of focus under a broad umbrella topic of research. So these first 3 questions I feel like are really great for those students who are just embarking on their dissertation or thesis. A lot of these questions are ones that the students kind of already have the answer to. So these can kind of help you to build that trust and that working relationship with your student. It can help you to understand their research topic better, and it allows them to become more familiar and just more confident when they're discussing their research. The 4th question, what is your primary research question? So related to the student's area of focus, what primary research questions are they asking? Their primary research question initially acts as a guide to draw the scope of their review. But as they start reading the literature, they might end up refining their ideas and also revising their question. Number 5, what is driving your research question? Is the student's research question driven primarily by practical, theoretical, value-driven, or methodological concerns? Does this question directly inform practice, test some theoretical assumptions, add value to an applied area, or examine a new methodological approach for a specific problem? Can the student use a foreground-background metaphor to examine these questions, or possibly another way to illustrate this sorting process? Number 6 is, how does your topic relate to the broader issues in your discipline? So the student might need to address how the review of the literature points to broader issues or concerns. Are there any issues explicit in the body of literature? And similarly, does the question follow or continue a recognized research trajectory? So this set of questions, I think, can allow students to identify the multiple facets of their subject, and it can help them to begin to create a plan for the types of sources they'll need and how they're going to go about finding them. 7, how is your proposed study both distinct from and related to other studies on your topic? So here we're challenging the student to identify what is distinct about their study. So highlighting any gaps in the literature that they might have discovered. The same topic could be explored from different lenses. So sociological, psychological, anthropological, economic, management, literary, or historic. These are good things to consider. 8, what would you say makes your study truly distinctive? Drawing from the gap in the literature, does their proposed study offer a new theoretical approach to an old question or a new method to test prior theoretical assumptions? So this is pretty much the hook to hang your study, also known as the so what or the why should you care about this? So really important topic to cover with your students. Number 9, do you have secondary or subsidiary questions to support your primary research question? So if so, how do they support the primary research question? Are these on the same analytical plane with one another? And how has the student tailored their methods to address these secondary questions? So I think that this set of questions can work best with students who are still kind of at that beginning state of their research. They should have a good idea of the different facets of their topic, but you can use these questions to help them delve a lot deeper into why their research has value and to examine any subsidiary questions that might have popped up while they've been gathering a bunch of sources. Number 10, does your study center on a case, episode, text, object, organization, issue, campaign, network movement, or other artifact, event, or domain? How would you justify that choice? So if their focus is not on a particular case, is theory methods or research questions going to be on the foreground? Which major features will they highlight in their proposal? I'm so sorry, that is my dog. She's not a contributing author on this, so don't listen to anything she says, just ignore her. 11, does your study involve a comparison between 2 or more cases, theories, or methodologies? If so, what is the rationale for selecting these? And what is the logic of these interrelationships? Then number 12, how would you explain your epistemological or meta-theoretical position? how would they describe their theoretical position, epistemology, or ontology to the reader? It's important to make the distinction between the broader terms such as the empirical, post-positivist, interpretive, critical, or postmodern. Epistemology is, how do scholars know what they know in a particular field? What paradigm shifts guide their work, both theoretically and methodologically? And how is this body of knowledge structured? So example, like what is the ontology of the field? These set of questions I think are great for students who have a pretty good idea for a study that they'd like to focus on. These prompts really help them to kind of dive deeper into the methodology and epistemology. And I think that for a lot of students, particularly a lot of the students that I meet with in education, they might not have heard some of this terminology before. However, they definitely have an idea of how to answer these questions. But I think that this can be another really great moment to kind of build that trust with students, kind of talk through some of the terminology, give them that confidence that they need. And I think a lot of times, maybe as a librarian, you're kind of neutral ground. If you're not on like their dissertation committee, it can be like a really great learning position. And with that, I'll hand it over to Omar.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Peppers, in the background. As Monica mentioned, we kind of highlighted some of these questions that focus specifically on literature review aspect of developing a research proposal in the thesis or dissertation phase. But some prompts are specifically geared towards data collection, research methods, data analysis. So I'll cover some of those prompts here. And number 13 kind of highlights that critical aspect of having a strong theoretical foundation to developing a research proposal. And this highlights what theories guide your work, what arguments will you make for using a particular theoretical framework that guides your research, and most importantly, why should we have a theoretical foundation to any research? So what's the purpose of theory? Number 14, how are your research methods tailored to address your research questions? So are you asking the students, are you using a qualitative, quantitative, or a mixed methods approach to answer your question? And how you frame your research might signify the use of a methodological approach, one methodological approach over another. So is your approach consistent with, or is it a departure from previous studies? So if you're asking, framing your questions as a classic example is, what are the lived experience of graduate students going through the dissertation process? So framing it as lived experiences, that's a very qualitative research question. So a quantitative example might be, to what extent does interactions or support from academic librarians help synthesize prior literature and helps those synthesis and transformation measures in literature review work. So that could be an example of a quantitative. So a combination of both would be a mixed methods approach. So highlighting those research methods and how they're tailored to address those research questions. Number 15, would you say that your research, your approach to the collection and analysis of data is primarily inductive, deductive, or some blend of those two approaches? So what kind of data do you plan to collect? Why have you chosen to collect and analyze data in this way? Will you be collecting and analyzing your data in a fashion that helps you answer your research questions, and how so? So number 15 looks at the inductive and deductive methodologies. Like, are you going from specific to general, as in theory development or grounded theory work, or deductive, are you testing out an existing theory with your methods? Next, please. Number 16 is, what sort of data, resources, experiences do you need to answer your questions? So this kind of falls in that data collection What kind of resources, experiences do you need to answer your research question? And what types of data resources are available to you? So this is interesting because a lot of our programs, especially master's programs, where students just have one semester to finish their thesis, and faculty colleagues encourage them to look at existing data sets in data repositories that have those key variables that they're looking for in their research questions, and run their analysis. So it's more like a mini dissertation and condensed dissertation in one semester, where they can do their analysis work and they don't have to collect original data. So that highlights that aspect. Number 17 is how are you selecting your samples of data? So more going back to the literature review, how other studies, empirical studies, have gathered their data, what sampling strategies have they used, and what are the limitations of those approaches to sampling, quota sampling, snowball sampling, and other statistical sampling approaches that that they may consider using for their proposal, and highlighting the limitations of the sample size, and asking the questions, do they have an adequate sample size? Number 18, how are you proposing to analyze your data? So that's great. You've collected all this data and you have a good data set. How will you analyze data that will help you answer your research questions? How will you test your hypotheses? And what levels of analysis will be needed? What post hoc test, if you're doing experimental design work or quasi-experimental design in educational settings or psychology, how will you conduct some of those tests? If you plan to gather qualitative data, how will you ensure trustworthiness and rigor in your research? So those are some of the things that are some of the prompts that are specifically geared towards data collection aspect. Next, please. Number 19, how do you plan to structure the analysis, interpretations, and findings in your writing? So now we're getting to the data analysis is done. How do you want to structure your dissertation or thesis? So how would you outline your results section? Would including charts, graphs support your findings or allow the reader to understand your results easier? Or will you use a combination of some of these approaches? So basically laying out some sort of structure. How do you plan to show this work to the reader? Number 20 is what would count as sufficient data in terms of interpretation of results, claims, or conclusions made. So how do you demonstrate the value of your data? How do you justify sufficient data collection or data saturation has been reached? And this is something, if you've been to, if your institution has open thesis or dissertation defense, this question gets asked a lot. So how did you decide that you have enough data and you reach that data saturation point? So highlighting that aspect in how other researchers have done it in the past and borrowing that aspect from the literature review is helpful as well. Number 21, what modifications might you make in the structure and content of your proposal as a result of carrying out the investigation? So a lot of graduate students we've talked to seem to have this mindset that once you write a proposal, defend a proposal, your first 3 chapters, your introduction, literature review, and method section, they're done. And that's set in stone. But important thing they learn from their faculty mentors is when you do the study and you collect data, you have to go back and revise your introduction, literature review, and methods, and they directly inform, and vice versa, how you're going to present your research. And specifically in the case of qualitative research, how did data collection inform your analysis? Because oftentimes, in qualitative studies, data collection informs analysis, and they go hand in hand. And sometimes you have to collect data and come up with an analysis plan at the same time. It's unlike quantitative work where you run an experiment or design a survey and you run analysis in Qualtrics or SPSS or other quantitative analysis platform. Next, please. 22, how will you check your findings, interpretations, and feedback to participants? Will you conduct any longitudinal analysis or longitudinal investigation? How have others checked or interpreted their findings? Could providing feedback to participants or member checking or building rapport with your participants and other ways of sort of triangulating your findings, do they add trustworthiness and rigor to your research design? 23, what strengths and limitations do you see in your project? So no research is perfect, right? So a lot of times students think that, well, this is, I don't see anything wrong with this, but when you read empirical studies, we often highlight that research has limitations, methodological limitations, theoretical assumptions that have certain limitations. So highlighting those alternative approaches to addressing the same question, but you chose one over the other, and why, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of those approaches. 24, what is the added value of your study? How do you respond to the so what? So Monica referred to the so what, and that's again one of those questions that gets asked a lot. So why should I care? Why should anyone in your discipline care about this work? What implication does your research have on future research, and how will your research impact the ongoing scholarly conversation on this topic? And if you addressed any previous gaps in the current scope of this research, how did you do so, and what impact do you foresee this project has on in the field? And then the last one, the number 25, is moving from the so what to now what. So what forms of follow-up work, including publications, community engagement, policy-related work, and training and education do you foresee? So looking at the big picture, what conferences or journals will be best suited as a good platform venue to present your work? Where do you see this line of research in 5 to 10 years? And do you notice any interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary connections with your work? And then if you are preparing for a tenure track faculty position, during those interviews, someone in the search committee might ask you, how does it fit in with your short-term and long-term research agenda? And what long-term value does it bring to your discipline? Next, please. So with these prompts in mind, we want to highlight a few things. Suitability of prompts is the first thing. So as we mentioned earlier, some of these prompts are better suited for master's degree programs where the master's thesis is a condensed research project where students are typically not collecting data, but using an existing data set. Some of them are more suited towards doctoral level research. And then different stages of the project as well. Some of them earlier ones that Monica went through, some of them are more suited towards the literature review aspect of the research proposal, methodology, and how those are linked in identifying key approaches, theoretical, methodological, epistemological approaches to research. And also, one thing that we wanted to highlight here is a lot of times our conversations with students and the faculty colleagues who are supervising, chairing these thesis and dissertation projects, they don't really get the full picture of the role of literature review. How does literature review inform your research? So students typically have that mindset that it's just a literature review section and I move on. And we try to stress that, no, the literature review really informs you how you are going to approach this research question methodologically, theoretically, what theoretical frameworks have been used in the past, what are the assumptions and limitations of using these approaches, and highlighting at the end of your literature review, your reader should be able to tell that there's a research gap in this body of literature on this topic, as opposed to a literature review that reads like summary of one study after another. So it's a conceptual, organized, focused review of literature, as opposed to Smith 2015 did this and Jones 2009 did this. So it really highlights, some of these prompts highlight the role of the literature review in scaffolding that research proposal document. And then measuring the effectiveness of these prompts in instruction is kind of hard, because some of the literature in ed psych world tends to look at some of these characteristics of students who are really good at synthesis and transforming and reading prior literature and synthesizing multiple information sources together conceptually. And they might be using some of the self-regulation strategies like elaborative interrogation prompts by default. So are they already doing this, or are we enhancing this by prompting them so they can be more metacognitively engaged in the content? So we don't know. And finding that objectively and empirically is kind of hard. And lastly, we want to open the discussion by asking you, how do you include questions or prompts or elaborations in your instruction?
We do have a couple of questions in the chat. There's one from Francis. It says, I work with students on conducting their literature review, but do not work with them on data collection, analysis, and writing. Is this something you're working with students on, or just prompting them to consider these questions in relationship to connections with the literature review?
Yes, we do. We have a social science research commons. It's a collaborative interdisciplinary space for faculty and students. So we do help them with data analysis questions. We do conduct Qualtrics workshops, SPSS workshops, help with finding existing data sets on platforms like ICPSR and other institutional disciplinary data repositories. So we do work directly with students at our social science research commons with those analysis type of questions. Other questions? Thoughts?
I see someone in the chat has mentioned SAGE research methods, and we do have access to that at our institution. And yes, under research tools, there's a project planner. Students love that. I always love showing them that resource as well.
And SAGE research methods actually also has, as Monica mentioned, a tool for laying out your variables. So if you're conducting quantitative research, what types of variables do you have? And then based on those, what types of analysis will you use? So yeah, we do like showing that aspect, and graduate students, absolutely, they love it. So thanks for pointing that out. It's a very useful tool.
A couple of comments, two from Anne. One is that she's relied more on the open-closed questions coming from perspective of the reference interview, remaining focused on the immediate information need rather than the breadth of process. And then she's in a question, are these questions asked all in one session, or do you meet with the students throughout the research process?
I'll give you my perspective, and Monica, please feel free to share more. So I haven't had a session where I've used all of these prompts in one session. So at our Social Science Research Commons, we do focused workshops for master's and doctoral level students who are just starting their research proposal projects. But we also do focused IL instruction sessions for graduate research methods courses as well. So these prompts have sort of evolved over time in the last couple of years or so. And some of them are used more than others, especially the earlier ones that Monica presented. Those literature review type ones are definitely more, get more coverage than the data analysis. Data analysis ones, I think most of them were tweaked, and we came up with those during our sessions with graduate students who are in the dissertation phase or thesis phase, and then they have specific questions on so what do I look for when I'm looking to find this data set, or what variables are important? And our responses generally is to, let's go back to your literature review and see how other scholars, researchers have defined these concepts. So those conceptual definitions, how have they measured these concepts, these variables? So the operational definitions. So I can't think of a single session where we've used all 25 of them, but it's good to have them ready so that we can present them or ask students to think about those things as we're trying to describe some of this stuff. Monica, anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. I think that, that first two set of questions maybe gets more mileage, just because I would say that those are probably typically the ones that I would use in an instruction session. So like we talked about, we do work pretty closely with the faculty when we teach these one-shot sessions to kind of discuss the student learning outcomes. So that gives me a really good idea of what questions will be useful. A lot of times the students will be in different phases. So like sometimes I'll meet with like a research methods class who's like gonna do a lit review, and maybe the students like haven't even had to like formally declare their topic yet. So a lot of those kind of beginning questions, really just like topic selection, topic narrowing and focusing, can be really useful for those. If it's a course where they have already chosen their topics, or possibly the instructor has chosen the topic, then you can take a look at some of those more specific questions related to subtopics, or gathering specific research, or any previous articles, research they might have read from the faculty member or in previous courses on this topic. So yeah, I would definitely agree with Omar there. I thought I was going to say something else. I think I forgot. So
we do have a couple of more questions. One, I'm going to combine a couple of some questions about faculty and your connection with faculty and faculty buy-in. So one is, do you have a lot of buy-in, and whether students are referred to you by faculty or if they come to you on their own? And the other is kind of related, and that is what advice do you have when this level of involvement with a student is unexpected or might be interpreted as a challenge to the path the student is already committed to based on guidance they've received from their instructors?
Sure, I'll jump in on the first one, Jen. Yeah, we do have a wonderful support from our faculty colleagues, and they truly see the value of what faculty librarians do at our institution. So there's constant back and forth. We do get invited to faculty meetings for the subject areas that we support. And then we go to graduate student orientations. We get invited to a lot of the campus sessions where we sort of introduce students to library resources. But most importantly, for our work, the collaboration is really starts with in the coursework stage of most graduate programs, where we are invited to present instruction sessions for pretty much all of the research methods courses, because the output, the end product in those courses, as you can imagine, is developing a research proposal. So that's the final assignment. So, and a lot of the students use that to tailor it to develop their master's proposals or dissertation proposals. So towards the end, or somewhat towards the end of their coursework stage, they take that research methods class. So that's a strong introduction to library resources and their subject librarian. And then our faculty colleagues have asked us specifically to do focused research methods instruction, literature review instruction. So we're constantly developing new workshops on survey design, analysis workshops using SPSS. So, and that level of instruction happens at the Social Science Research Commons, in collaboration also with faculty colleagues who co-present at times, or sometimes ask us to lead those workshops. And the second question, Monica, how do you feel about the second aspect?
I think that some of the things you mentioned already kind of build into that relationship. Just, having, going to those department meetings, specifically saying like, you can help grad students who are beginning their thesis or their dissertation. And then, just having the department know who you are, you're their librarian. You can, you teach these methods classes for them. You can teach other IL info sessions. I think we've got like a really great supportive culture on our campus. Like all the faculty know they can email me with research questions. They can email me to ask for materials, and we'll consider purchasing them. So I think that it's part of that bigger culture that I don't feel I've ever kind of like run into an issue where there's been like that kind of conflict. Like we said, sometimes I know that like in educational leadership, the department that I'm a liaison to for the library, like the advisor who takes on the students, like they specifically ask them to meet with me first thing before they have kind of began their work on their dissertations after they've submitted their proposals. So I think that maybe, it's just kind of building the blocks to that relationship. I can definitely see how it could maybe cause some conflict if perhaps the library and the department don't really have that type of relationship. And I think in order to build that kind of relationship, probably starting, at the faculty level, just trying to speak more with faculty to show that you want to collaborate. You don't want to you don't want to tell their students to do something different than what they said. You want to support that, and you want to complement that with what you can provide regarding these IL ideas and like the ACRL framework. I think might be one way to consider combating that.
And that brings us just about to the end of our session. We do have a couple unanswered questions, which I can forward along to you, or if you want to share your contact information again. And we also had, because we did have someone ask if you would be
Sure.
sharing your
Yeah, we
slides in
have
the
our contact
questions.
info on the last slide. Thank you, Jen. We're happy to answer any questions after the session. So feel free to let us know, email us. Happy to chat.
Thank you so much, Omer and Monica. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you for moderating, Jen.
Jen, can we just give a reminder to everybody over lunch, for those who are taking lunch now, that we have the summit hallway, kind of open hangout Zoom room for everybody. So please join us for some conversation.
Good reminder. And there's the link to all of the other links